So this guitar is a 2001 National, and the song I was just playing on it is an 8-bar blues called Nobody's Fault But Mine. And Nobody's Fault But Mine is one of the 5 songs I teach on my new PDF, The 5 8-Bar Blues You Should Know. If you want to download that PDF, just go to the link below or to my website, fretboardconfidential.com, to get your hands on that. But today I'm going to talk about this National guitar, where I got it, what I like to use it for, and a few more details about the guitar itself. So let's go. All right, so at the time I got this guitar, I actually had finally gotten my hands on an old National. When I moved to Austin in 2000, I went to a place called One World Music, and as they say in Spinal Tap, don't look for it, it's not there anymore. But it used to be on the second story of a building in South Austin, just above a fantastic club called the Continental. The Continental's still there, and now that second story is actually a pretty cool venue called the Continental Gallery. But at the time, it was a guitar store, and they had a few 1930s wood body Nationals. They had a couple of National Trojans, and the one that I picked out needed a neck reset, but other than that, it was actually in really nice shape, and it had a fantastic sound. It was not nearly as sort of bright and harsh as a lot of other Nationals I'd tried, and I didn't even really want a metal body one because I wanted to play it standing up, and that's not really a great idea with something like a tricone. Also, tricones were about 3 times as much at the time, so the Trojans were a more affordable way to get an older National guitar, but I also just really liked the idea of a wooden National. So that's what I got. And a year or two later, I was going to go out and do a bunch of events for Acoustic Guitar Magazine, because I'd written these books called The Acoustic Guitar Method, and they were going to send me out to a bunch of places to talk about the books and hold some clinics. And they said, well, whose stuff do you use? We'll get some sponsorships. And so I mentioned that I used a National. And the funny part was when the guys at the newly reformed National Resophonic Company, which I think had been around for 8 or 10 years at that point, they got back to me and they were like, well, do you really play a National? Because a lot of times people say, oh, I play a National, and they have an old dobro or they have some other kind of Resophonic guitar. I was like, no, really, it's a real National. So we're like, okay, cool. And so we worked out the situation where I could use this guitar, and it was one of the ones that they had just made. And so they were making new wood body National. So the Estrelita was their 12 fret model, and I guess the Deluxe was because it had, like the fancy headstock, and it had the binding and all that kind of stuff. Part of the reason I wanted to get a National at that time was that when I moved to Austin, I would see Steve James play a lot. And Steve James always played a National, and he had like vintage tricones and that kind of thing. But I thought it was cool that was his main guitar. And from watching him play, I realized like you didn't have to leave it in open tuning, and you didn't have to play slide. And so I started messing around with playing in standard tuning and just sort of playing the kinds of stuff I would play on a regular flat top guitar on the National, which is how I ended up playing tunes like Nobody's Fault But Mine and other things like that. The other thing I learned from Steve that was really good to learn, and I can't believe how long it took me to actually implement it, but he explained that at least on the newer ones, you could take the strap off. The strap is this metal part that goes over the cone. This gizmo is called a biscuit on a National, and it's basically this round thing that is helping to support the cone and the whole apparatus with the cone and the cover plate. And then the bridge is, the saddle is kind of set into the biscuit. But usually there's this metal part that covers it. It's almost like when you see pictures of old Fender basses, sometimes people haven't taken off this big plate that covers up the pickup. And this was kind of the same idea. There was a strap over the bridge, and on the newer ones, there's these 4 little tiny screws, and you can take it off. And the thing that's great about that is that then you can rest your hand right where the strings meet the bridge, so you can do palm muting on a National. So on the old one that I have, on the old 30s Trojan, the strap is kind of attached to the cover plate, so you can't take it off, at least not by yourself, and at least not without sort of making a mess of the instrument. I suppose you could buy a new cover plate and then take the strap off of that. That just occurred to me just now, but I haven't done that. So with this one, the strap is off, so I can play it more like I would play, my Martin or the Collings or whatever, and it lets you have a little more control over the dynamics in the bass register. Now at this point, I do kind of find this guitar a little too kind of bright and honky for just playing the kinds of stuff I would play in standard tuning without a slide. But it does project, and it does have definitely a different character from some of the other guitars I might play. So one of my favorite things to do is still to play it in an open tuning, and I'll use it for slide because it really cuts through in a mix, and you can really hear it if it's being surrounded by other instruments, and it definitely has a very specific character that works really well. So for the sake of completeness, here's what this guitar does sound like in open C tuning. C, G, C, G, C, E, and played with the slide. This is a rock slide that I've been fooling around with lately. So here's Nobody's Fault But Mine, but in open C tuning. So that's the story with my 2001 National. Again, if you want to learn my standard tuning arrangement of Nobody's Fault But Mine, check out my PDF on 5 8-bar blues you should know at the link below or at my website, fretboardconfidential.com. If you got a question about today's lesson or a comment for me, please leave it down below. I'd love to hear from you. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.